Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Broncos. I'm sitting here with my man, Frankie Abbott, another Thursday podcast. Man, how are you doing today?
Doing great. It's the best day of the week. It's Thursday. We've got football tonight. There's a Patriots-Texans game going right now. I'm watching CJ Stroud get absolutely battered by Bill Belichick. But
what did you think of that pick? Tell me about that pick. I know we were talking about
I don't know. CJ Stroud's gonna have that mistake happen once. It's better to have it happen now. But it's just a rookie error. He's throwing late against cover one robber, and the guy came down. He didn't see the safety. Jalen Mills took it away. Nice return, and that'll happen. But again, it's just good to see those things happen now. Bill Belichick is just the perfect coach to destroy rookie quarterbacks. His record is always one of the best. So, it's going to be a tough time for CJ Stroud going forward, but yeah.
No, it definitely is. It definitely is. With these young quarterbacks, preseason really doesn't matter. I hope he just learns from his mistakes, all of that different type of stuff. Like you said, that Bill Belichick defense, man, it gets those rookie quarterbacks. But we do have a very special guest on today's podcast, and that is Joe Rowles.
Hello.
Joe, how are you doing today? I'm excited to have you on. I was telling you before the show, I think one of the most knowledgeable people in the whole entire Broncos sphere. When I was writing about football for Mile High Sports, I would always look at your stuff just for confirmation bias, just to be hey, am I thinking the right thing right now? Is this something I actually should be believing? Now go to you and try to figure that out. So, yeah, how are you doing today, man?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be on. When you guys reached out to me, I was like, yeah, I would love to come on. So
yeah. Well, cool.
Excited to be here.
Exactly. I'm excited you're here, man. I really, really am. Let's get straight into it. Let's get straight into the topics today. The initial depth chart did come out.
Yep.
I was wondering, Joe, for you, and then Frankie will move to you right after.
Mm-hmm.
Joe, was there anything that stood out to you right from the beginning when you took a look at that thing? Was there something that was like, hey, this is kind of crazy, or whatever the case may be?
So nothing like too crazy, but a couple things that really jumped out to me. And I think I tweeted about it, but I think Albert O is kind of in rough shape. And I know part of this is that blocking so important, but him being at the bottom of the depth chart, I went and looked actually right before I came on about how many players Peyton has carried on the roster coming out of camp in the past. He never carries 5 tight ends. So that's not good for Albert O. Similar to and then a similar boat like Montrell Washington. I know there was a report that he's turned the corner this year, but you would think if he's really kind of turned it on, he wouldn't be at the bottom of the wide receiver depth chart.
True.
So that's not necessarily great, especially also when he's gonna lose return snaps to Marvin Mims, and then McLaughlin looks like he's also nipping at his heels for him too. So Washington's probably in a hot spot. I think Albert O is in tough shape. Jonathan Harris was kind of a surprise. I didn't expect him to be the starter. I understand with Mike Purcell's injury, that might also be a factor here, but Harris was a guy, I thought he played well last year. When he, before he got moved to the practice squad. So he's kind of been a guy hanging around for a minute, but moving from that to being the starter, it's kind of caught my eye for sure.
Man, the one thing with Jonathan Harris for me was okay, I understood the interior defensive line was an issue, and then I took a look at the initial depth chart there, and it really hit me right then. I'm looking at the names, I'm really, he's starting right now. That's an insane thing. It just doesn't seem right. Joe, I think you had a tweet about this today where it was this guy has worked his way. He stayed on the roster this entire time, which is a really good thing, promising, whatever. But it didn't come at him beating over other people for his job. It came at other people losing or getting out, leaving Denver, and then now he's the starter. So that is definitely concerning. I think that's a great point you bring.
And I think that's important too, for fans to kind of keep in mind, just for the sake of when you look back to 2 years ago, the last time I was doing this, writing all the time about this, the Broncos defensive line group was pretty loaded. We were having this whole thing of who are they going to carry? Because if you have 5 guys, they have 5 guys.
The McTelvin dream.
Yep. And then all of a sudden they're down to the 2 proven guys other than Purcell are really DJ Jones, Zach Allen.
Right.
No, so Harris is going to stand out when everybody else is kind of either hurt or you don't know what they do yet.
Yeah,
man, we don't even have Awazarike to be like, maybe he takes a step this next year. We don't have that hope, you know what I mean? But Frankie, is there anything that really stands out to you?
I mean, nothing else that Joe didn't really mention. I mean, another thing would be the depth on both sides of the trenches. The offensive line depth is just kind of atrocious, especially along the interior. I mean, a guy kind of like Jonathan Harris, who just seems to have hung around this roster for years now, is Quinn Bailey. And it seems like when you look at that interior offensive line group, the best backup there is probably between like Quinn Bailey, Wattenberg. Kyle Fuller has experience, but it's not really good experience. Like, it's kind of a mess there. And this is an offensive line group that, like, you know, you pray and hope that you can keep your starting five all together the entire time, but it's just like, it's not necessarily the most likely thing. And it's not like we have kind of a even semi-quality reserve, I'd say. I think it's kind of one of those things where once a chink in the armor kind of hits, I think it could kind of collapse the entire offense as a whole.
That's a group I expect Peyton and them to like start to look at, because again, when I looked at this, Peyton in the past, like when he was with the Saints, they would routinely carry 5 interior offensive linemen. It might be 2 centers and 3 guards. It might be 4 guards and a center, but like they'll carry 5. Like they almost always did.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, that's super interesting.
Yeah, so we might see some more roster churning out of Peyton, because that's what I kind of assume will happen with the interior defensive line. Because I think, like, I'd say a lot of us in Broncos country were kind of shocked when Shelby Harris got brought in for a visit. There's a lot of these guys. I mean, I think Matthew Ioannidis is still available out there. Like, there's some quality veterans. I think they can kind of plug and play and be that starting 3 tech or 3-5 tech, whatever they kind of need out there. But it seems like they are kind of willing to play the let's let it rotate out a little bit. George Payton has always played the game where he can find the Jonas Griffiths of the world that guys are maybe willing to unload for a 7th round pick or might end up being available on a cut day. So I'm hopeful that George Payton can find a guy, but it definitely is really concerning when you consider how injured this team has been over the last few years. It's kind of wild how little depth there is, keeping that in mind.
Yeah, no, it definitely is crazy, man. I mean, hey, Jedi Joshua, he comes in here. I'm a big fan of Jedi. He says, that is not what I pictured Joe to look like. I like the beard, man.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I hit about March this year, and I had just decided I'm going to see what happens and just let it grow. And so I have not done anything with like this part of the beard down since March.
It's looking good. It's grown in very fully. Mine doesn't come in at all. I'm 60, I'm pretty sure, and I'm just living with it at this point.
Come ski season, yeah, I don't have to get a neck gaiter. It's nice. So there you go.
Yeah, I love it. Joe, the next question I want to ask you, man, is, you know, we're working our way into preseason here. I've seen some tweets about you with you about this, and it's just like the Broncos are playing 15 to 20 snaps in this next game. What is your opinion with that? And then especially with the field conditions the Cardinals have right now, do you think it's a bad idea that the Broncos are playing their starters in this game?
I mean, again, as a fan, I love it because like I want to see the new offense. I want to see, you know, the starters playing in the new offense. So like purely from that perspective, it's great. And I hope fans enjoy it because a lot of teams aren't getting that. On the other hand, if I generally agree with like the model of like McVay, where it's like, just keep them all in bubble wrap until you can't anymore. Right. Because especially it's just the only thing that you're really getting out of this is a few snaps against another team. Honestly, the chances of injury are just not worth it, especially when you have questions about depth at some of these positions. For me, not worth it.
I tend to agree with you. I really do, especially because when I look at these positions that I have a really hard time understanding of who or understanding who's good in training camp. I really do. Like, because when I go to training camp, there's some positions where it's just like, I have no idea. I've sat here and watched you and I still have no clue because you guys aren't hitting. The majority of the questions come with the backups. Like, I know who the starters are going to be. That guy's not beating you out. You know what I mean? Like, I have an idea. Like, when the Broncos drafted Javonte Williams in the second round, and traded up for him, I didn't have to question who was the Broncos starting running back that year. It's for those second string and third string guys. I want to see those guys particularly just go all in. Like, I want to see those guys. Those are the guys that I'm like, okay, prove me something. These other guys I have an idea of. Frankie, what is your opinion there?
Yeah, so I've got a few different thoughts. I mean, my first thought is I have a lot of concerns about the guys recovering from injury. Like Javonte playing on a choppy field worries me. Guys like Randy Gregory, I have no interest in seeing Randy in the preseason. I think guys like him, like we know what he's worth. Sadly, we're already paying him so much money. You need to get the value out of his contract, I think, in the regular season. And I think losing out on that would just be really painful. And I think sadly at this point, you can kind of say I don't want to say it's likely, but it's like, you just don't want to take that risk at this point.
On that note, Randy Gregory in a lot of ways, and this will sound kind of mean, but like, he kind of reminds you of Ronald Darby, and in fact, that like when he's on the field, you know he's going to be good.
Yep.
Yes.
But you
don't need to see
him not being on the field at least a little bit each year.
Yeah.
And that's not, not to hate on him, but
No,
it's
that's
just,
a perfect way to put it.
Every single year.
And I think with that, like, I mean, the coaches know what they have in him. I don't think you need to see him do a lot of things. And I think when you talk about like, I mean, I guess like with his position, I don't think they're going to be asking him to do a ton of variation things. It's not like he's learning different coverages, learning different assignments like that. Like his role is pretty like, it's the same from team to team most of the time. He might be doing a little bit of different things, but his role is not going to be terribly varied, where I don't think you necessarily need to get him the live reps, get him a few. Sure. The other thing I want to mention, I've always liked the approach that some teams do where it's like you see what you need to see out of a player and then you put him on ice for the rest of the season. I wonder if that will be an approach maybe they take. Like if we see Russ in the offense look pretty good for like 2-3 drives in the first game, maybe 2 games, I don't think they need to see him for a third game. I would love to see that. And then I guess my final point would be, I'm fine with them seeing the offense in the preseason. Like if they want to get the pre-snap penalties, they want to get this ship righted, they want Russ to get his timing with the receivers, I get that. I don't think this defense has any reason to play their starters. I really don't. Guys like Patrick Surtain, Justin Simmons, like this was one of the best defenses in the league. I don't believe they're returning 8 starters. I don't believe there's going to be that much fall off going to this Vance Joseph scheme. There might be a little bit, but I really don't think there'll be that much. From what we're hearing, there's going to be a lot of carryover. Like there just isn't really a lot of reward to me for risking this when I don't think they're going to have the hardest time. And when you talk about, man, everyone's so concerned about how the Broncos didn't play in the preseason last year. The defense was one of the best units in the league throughout the first 9 weeks of the season. And they didn't play in the preseason either. Patrick Surtain did not need to play in the preseason last year to be the best corner in the NFL. Like there's some guys that I don't need to see it, So that's my last little idea on that.
The defense was good until they lost pass rushers.
Yep, exactly.
And Jedi Joshua, he comes and he says, yeah, Randy Gregory misses time, the George Payne special.
Oh.
Right on cue.
Well, man. And on that note, though, like one of the big complaints I have about Payne, and I've had this throughout from a process standpoint, is he always bought free agents after the career year. Like Ronald Darby has that year where he stays healthy every game. He gets signed for the Broncos with big money. Randy Gregory plays all the games for the Dallas Cowboys, looks great, has a great game or a great year. They sign him. And it's just these are guys that throughout their career have shown that they haven't an issue staying healthy.
Yeah.
No,
it's not a surprise.
Another big thing, I mean, this is just kind of a random other point, is just how much Peyton has invested into this defense over the years, both in draft picks and in these huge contracts he's given out. When you think about what he took over as a team and what they needed to fix, I think we all know he needed to fix the offense. When you really go back and look at the draft picks he's allocated, when you look at the amount of money he's spent towards the offensive line, which he fixed, I guess, a little bit this past offseason, but you can definitely say he had to. They overspent on guys like McGillicuddy because they literally haven't built the depth up. We're talking about guys like Quinn Bailey, who have been here since 2019, and he it seems all but guaranteed that Quinn Bailey will probably start a game for the Broncos this year because they just haven't allocated the resources to build up these units.
All right. No, I agree. But
he just wants to draft DBs. You got to draft 3 DBs a year.
I think the chat is agreeing with you guys. Everyone in here has said the same thing. I want to get it to the more positive note.
Oh, yeah. Happy to.
I want to switch it over to just for a second.
Yeah.
Who are you guys, as we move into our preseason segment here, who are you guys excited to watch in the preseason? Who's somebody that you guys are looking forward to? And Joe, we'll start off with you.
I mean, if he ever gets healthy, I want and it probably won't happen yet, but I would love to see Justin Simmons.
Yeah. Very true. I mean, Joe lost us for a second here real quick. I'm excited to watch Justin Simmons too. We caught it right at the tail end. Justin Simmons.
Should I cut in with mine, or do we keep going on Simmons?
I'll go on Simmons real quick. I think Simmons was a great addition. I think Simmons was a great answer just because of everything he brings. He's a tremendous player, and who wouldn't be excited to watch Justin Simmons in the preseason or in any time playing football because he's just that good. I think that was a good answer. Frankie, what do you think of Justin Simmons in the playoff or in the preseason?
I'm excited to see him. I hope he's able to stay healthy. It's a bummer that he's already enduring it feels like a lot of these injuries we're seeing that are minor for a lot of these guys, sadly, are those ones that are going to nag. You were talking about how a groin injury is such an irritating one to get through. It really hampers your movement, especially when you talk about a guy who's playing safety, who's going to have to be turning his hips a lot. You need your groin muscles to be able to do that stuff. So like, that's going to be kind of hopefully an injury that doesn't kind of nag him throughout the year. You talk about McGlinchey kind of struggling with a knee problem already. You talk about, sorry, I'm kind of spoiling a little bit of our news for later, but like, you know, I do worry a little bit about some of these guys, how they're going to be hampered through the rest of the year, but I'd be very excited to see how Justin Simmons looks in this new defense. I'm excited to see what he ends up doing for Vance Joseph. If he ends up kind of playing in that deep roller, if they end up having him play a little bit closer to the line this year. And I don't know, I'm excited to see what he ends up doing in this new defense and how he communicates with his hopefully like new seemingly starting partner with Caden Stearns looking like he's going to be the starting two next to him.
Yeah, Frankie. I mean, I totally agree with you there. It just he's one of the guys that's gonna be fun to watch any time in football. Who do you have as a guy there that you're excited to?
Yeah, I got one for offense, one for defense, both rookies, because you know me, we love our draft picks around here. I've got Marvin Mims. You know me, I'm a huge Marvin Mims guy, big play machine. I think the preseason is built for him, and I think they're going to load up a couple deep bombs. You think about those KJ Hamler preseason games where he would snap off a 60-yard catch down the middle, down the seam or something because he's against a UDFA corner who can't keep up with him. That's exactly what I'm expecting Marvin Mims to do. I think we're also going to get to see him really perform as a punt returner. My prediction is that Mims ends up winning the punt return job because he was really good at that at Oklahoma. So I'm excited to see what he can do there. Yeah, I think he's probably the guy I have circled the most. The receivers we've seen drafted by Sean Payton in the past have always ended up being very good. So this was the first Sean Payton draft pick, and I want to see how it ends up looking.
Yeah, I think that's a really good one there. And we have Joe right back.
We're back.
We were talking, man, it happens. No need to even address it, man.
Yeah.
I've done the same thing. I've been hosting before, trying to lead segments, and now we just have two people that don't know how to delete.
I just turn my thing off mid-show all the time and leave Joey. I don't even care.
I've done the exact same thing, so no need to even address it. I'll give you a recap, man.
Okay.
We both agree with you with Justin Simmons, simply out of the fact, man, that he's just a fun football player to watch. Yeah. Who doesn't want to watch this guy at any time, whether it be the regular season, the preseason? I would love to watch him in the playoffs one day. That would be a fun thing.
That's the dream.
Yes.
But what I was going to say, if you don't like, I'll try and hop back in.
Oh, of course, go.
The competition between Kareem Jackson and Caden Stearns is really interesting because I have kind of thought that Caden Stearns was going to get that starting job for a while now. So like, it's been interesting that Jackson continues to hold him off. And with the new coaching staff, I'm kind of curious to see if that holds up. The other one that obviously like we kind of were talking about this before the show, but honestly, the receiver battles is really interesting to me just because when you look at Peyton tends to carry a lot of receivers. Like he tends to carry 6. And as you alluded to earlier today, like imagine if they had traded Jerry Jeudy or Cortland Sutton, like how that was going to shake out. But like, as it is, like you have the former Saints kind of competing. You have obviously Marvin Mims is a lock. You kind of like, I would think Brandon Johnson, the fact that before his injury, he was like looking like the third receiver. So like, it's going to be an interesting battle. Honestly, like, as we were talking about, kind of almost like in a bad way, but like the interior offensive line battles are going to be really interesting to watch, especially because during camp, you don't really get a good idea of like what's going on. The preseason will actually start to give you an idea of who stands out, both in terms of we'll see snap counts, which will give us an idea of who the coaching staff has faith in, but also like who can actually hold up to live fire in preseason games because they're also fighting against other guys on their teams who are trying to get jobs.
Yeah, that's a fact, man. That's a good one. That's a good one.
With the O-line, too, it'll be interesting to see who they kind of slot around in these different positions because at least for guys like Kyle Fuller, and I mean, it seems like it's just kind of been a Peyton thing and it's just becoming more and more prevalent in the NFL is who of these guys can play multiple spots. That's such an important thing in today's game.
Yeah, totally. I mean, okay. Frankie, he said Marvin Mims right there for his and I mean, man, he gave a really good explanation for that as well. I'm excited.
If the hammy's not hampering him too much and he's able to get on the field.
Yeah, especially if he's taking that punt and kick returner role, right? He right now looks like he's the number one on both of those. Really weird. Tremont Smith, the cornerback we signed, who's been a punt and kick returner his entire career, isn't even listed on the depth chart as a punt and kick returner. Really odd to me. I'll move on to mine, though. I'm excited to see how Nick Benito looks, not because I'm overly high on Nick Benito, but because I'm just interested to see. You know what I mean? Like, it's one of those guys we drafted high in the draft. Did I love the pick at the time? I didn't. But those same people that were saying that they were stoked about the Nick Bonito pick, I have a hard time wondering why. I don't know why the people that loved him are now struggling on him. Like, if you made that flip, it's confusing because he's made no difference for me when I've watched his Oklahoma tape to when I've watched now. If you're looking for an edge rusher to come in and set a hard edge right now, he was never that guy.
Didn't have to be.
Never that guy.
And you didn't want to turn him into that guy.
No. Yes, he's always in my mind been a designated pass rusher, and then maybe better than your average pass rusher if you're doing something crazy and now he's dropping back into a zone coverage or something like that. He's better at that than the average edge rusher. He's never been someone that's setting a hard edge or an every down pass or an every down edge player. He's never been that. So that's really confusing to me. Vance Joseph has given him a lot of props and press conferences saying that he does look more like that guy that can set that edge. And I'm just interested to see now, is Vance Joseph correct?
Well, and to your point, like, honestly, everything we saw from him last year kind of was just what you expected if you really watched him coming out of Oklahoma. So it wasn't a surprise, but like usually when like the big questions about those pass rushers is like play strength, learning how to play the run, like that kind of stuff. You start to notice that in year 2 and 3 if they're gonna make that jump, like if they're gonna start to get that growth. So I agree. Like he is a player that I really do hope we can see some growth in. Like you, I wasn't down on the pick, but I wasn't ecstatic about the pick because there was definitely other players I liked more. But like he still has time to like prove me wrong. I hope he does.
And you knew his role, right, Joe?
Yeah.
That was the main thing. It was like you always knew what he was going to bring to an NFL roster. Yeah. Or in my mind, that's what I figured. It was like this guy is going to be in there and be a designated pass rusher. That's his job. Yeah. I never thought he was going to be the guy. I don't know. Like, I just never thought he was going to be that every down guy.
Yeah, I think some of that probably added to it was like the trading of Bradley Chubb, who was like that true like 3 down, can be your run stopping end, can be your guy that can rush the passer. I think when people kind of saw him get traded, they just kind of like, oh, well, Nick Bonito will just be that guy next year. I think that probably had to play a bit of a role as well, And
to most fans, like obviously not us, but like from a not casual, but like from a more casual fan perspective, they drafted him really highly. The hype on any of these guys like coming through camp is always like not always realistic, like to be fair. So like when you get into the regular season and that happens, it's just like, yeah, he's got to be the guy. He's going to be. And then when he kind of flops, it's like it's not really a surprise if you knew the skill set coming in.
Yeah. Well, and when we talk about those guys that perform better in training camp settings, these guys that perform better in these ideas, like Nick Bonito is that type of guy. He's very explosive, very quick laterally. He's able to kind of work that inside swim move very well. I mean, that's the biggest thing I'd say I'm watching out for him this year is, has he been kind of able to get better working with his hands? Has he been able to add more to that pass rush toolkit? Because really all we saw last year was, cross chop outside, try to beat on the outside shoulder, or possibly spin inside. Like, that was really the only 2 we ever saw. It would be I really want to see him kind of add more to that toolkit because he has the athleticism to do so. But I think that was the big thing a lot of people kind of noted coming out of Oklahoma is usually when you have these freak athletes, they're at least more willing to try things. You just haven't really seen Nick Bonito try a lot of variations of different stuff. So hopefully we do get to see that this year, kind of like we saw Baron Browning make that jump last year, trying out all these
maybe things. Jared Allen's taught him a thing or two.
Definitely.
Hopefully. And I guess I'll just add on to that by saying that, Frankie, I think you're definitely right. Like, don't trust the tweets you see from that area on all of this. I've seen people, edge rushers, all of a sudden work their way back into the center on one-on-ones and then look on Twitter and see people being like, oh, so-and-so beat him for a sack in the one-on-ones.
Well, then you got, I don't know if you guys saw the Penei Sewell rep today, the Penei Sewell Thibodeau rep today, where then you have guys saying that reps are wins when it's like, oh no, man! That guy got demolished right there. That guy didn't even get an inch right.
That's really how it is. That really is how it is. I think the Drew Lock, Teddy Bridgewater camp best describes that into the differences of opinions on that. I mean, I was hopping on there saying something, and then I'd look online and see 1,000 people saying something the complete opposite of what I was talking about.
It's confirmation bias season,
Yeah, it is.
One other player I wanted to mention just that I am really jazzed to see is Drew Sanders. He was a guy that again, this year, because I was kind of doing other stuff with like working outside of the game, I was not as into draft season this year as I was in the past. But like after the Broncos drafted them, I went back and kind of like what Drew Sanders was the guy, like after watching like the tape, I was most excited for coming into.
Thank you. See,
Yes.
this is the confirmation bias I was talking about earlier.
He looks exciting. The skill set's exciting. You can never have too many pass rushers. Like the big question about him, obviously, again, it's like play strength. But like in the preseason, we're going to get kind of start to get like an idea of how much that will impact him rookie season.
Yeah,
so
and he can just fill it right into that Zaven Collins role that we've been seeing Vance use for a couple of years now. So that's really exciting.
Joe, do you mind if I? Okay, we're going a little off topic here, but I want to dig into you about. Are you okay going into a little bit on Drew Sanders real quick and what you saw? Okay, perfect. What do you think about? I thought and I'm wondering if you also agree with me here. Just different opinions or whatever the case may be. I thought his biggest issue for me was his play strength. I thought that he had an issue. I think he weighs 230 pounds. 230 pounds at 6'5" is a lot different than 230 at 6'1".
Yeah.
I think that with added play strength, this is a player that we could see really, really grow. I think that goes to his tackling. I think that goes with his getting off of blockers. I think that is a big thing for him. And I was wondering if you agree or disagree.
I do. And one of the things, and again, like I haven't been in the room with Drew Sanders looking at his frame, that kind of thing. So like keep that in mind. Right. But like as you mentioned, like and this is kind of like a draw. Al Wilson was 6 foot 230, and Al Wilson at 6 foot 230 looked like a fire hydrant. Like he looked stout.
Yeah.
At 6'5", like you're starting to stretch out, and you're losing a little bit of that like the natural leverage you're gonna have as like a taller guy. Granted, you have longer arms, but like you have to be able to kind of play with the fact that you're also guys are gonna be able to get under you, and so having that extra weight does make a difference. So yes, I agree with you, and I think that might be an adjustment for him this year because again, in college, he was one of the most athletic players on the field almost all the time. So he was able to kind of mask that a little bit just by being just more explosive, quicker, and then just having kind of the instincts to like make it work. So yeah, I do think in the NFL, he's going to have some adjustment, but I also am excited to see how much of that is going to happen because I think if he can hit the ground running this year, like the Broncos have a pretty solid linebacker core, at least 3 deep.
Oh, no, totally. And I think that the reason why I'm excited about Drew Sanders, other than these other guys, is his trajectory is kind of clear for me. I'm looking at, hey, in year one, I see a clear role for you. In year two, with added play strength and stuff like that, I see that you might be a starter by year 2 or whatever the case may be. You know, you have all these other guys moving on, and just that clear path is a big deal for me.
Well, and one of the things I'm really excited about with him too is he has that skill set where like you can think, and it's easy to get in this mindset where everybody's going to hit their ceiling. And I know you and I have talked about this before, like, but the Madden construct of like, well, he has this skill set, but like in 3 years, like he's going to be a 99 overall and he can do this. But like, but he has the skill set where like down the road, he could be just a versatile weapon who can pass rush, drop in coverage, run sideline to sideline, solid run stopper. So like you can see that with like a growth mindset, like he could be a really big time player for the Broncos.
Yeah, no, totally. And I'm going to move us on to the next conversation here. I kind of went off topic with that Drew Sanders thing, but I was curious.
Yeah. Don't want me to hype up Thomas Incoom. I get
it. No, but I Frankie, no Thomas Incoom. That doesn't get the views, unfortunately. No, but hey, this kind of relates, right? Because I'm curious with the Vance Joseph now, the defensive coordinator of the Broncos. I'm curious to see what he's running just like schematically tomorrow. We've seen conflicting reports on what's going out from there. Some people at training camp are talking about, hey, we're seeing a completely different scheme, while he is out there saying that we're running the exact same thing. It's a continuation of what Christian Parker or from Evero and Vance Joseph or Vic Fangio. I'm screwing up on all these names right now. We're running down here in Denver. I'm really curious about that. And I guess Drew Sanders, to me, he makes sense in a Vance Joseph type situation. Like when I look back at what Vance Joseph has ran in the past with Isaiah Simmons, extremely versatile in a way different way than Drew Sanders, a more safety linebacker. And then Zaven Collins, who's very similar to a Drew Sanders. So, Joe, what do you think the Broncos are going to be doing tomorrow? Do you have a strong opinion either way?
I'm of the mindset that so there was the Jonathan Cooper quote that came out. It was I know it wasn't just a Mile High Report, but I found it on Mile High Report. Scotty Payne wrote like his training camp notes and I saw it. But Payton basically was complimenting Jonathan Cooper by saying that like he has this physicality that you really need in like a gap and a half / 2 gap defense. That to me is a sign that at least from the front perspective, we're going to see a lot more Fangio type of stuff because Vance Joseph typically ran quite a bit of one gapping. Like, and that was part of, and again, like for a fan perspective, keep in mind that like coverage and front are married together. Like they're not running like solo. One of the things about running like single high is because then you have another person down to run the box. Because if you're running single gap, you need somebody to catch that extra gap. If you're running gap and a half, it's easier to run too high back because they're filling, but they're farther back. But you have that gap already accounted for by the players that are already up front. To me, the fact that Payton said that suggests that we're going to see more Fangio. And maybe we'll see a bit of a marriage because, again, like the Broncos didn't hire Vance Joseph just to run. And if they did, like I do have questions. But I have a lot of faith in Sean Payton because I have a lot of respect for him in general. And I feel like Payton hired Vance Joseph because he has the ability to kind of marry these two together. But they're very different defenses. So I'm very intrigued to see what happens.
Yeah. No, I definitely am as well. Frankie, what is your opinion there? Do you agree with Joe?
Yeah, I agree. I think it is going to be a lot of that Fangio. I don't think it's going to be there's obviously going to be pieces of the Evero, but like what a lot of people got to keep in mind is Evero wasn't like your standard Fangio defense. He did a lot of weird things. He did a lot of things that you don't necessarily see a Fangio defense doing, especially when you talk about the rotations and the disguises he was running and the coverages that has never really been a big thing for Vance. So that I don't think we're going to see so much. But as far as like the carryover, I went back and I've been listening to some of Chris Harris's comments from when he was on he's on Patrick Chiody's podcast. I know he's also, I don't know, Chris Harris is on Twitter always talking. So when Vance got hired, he was talking about how when he got brought to the 2016 defense, he did a really good job like marrying the lingo that they used from the 2015 defense. And he was kind of able to do a lot of the carryover while still like he almost let the players kind of coach themselves, which is obviously a lot easier when you have guys like Von Miller and DeMarcus Ware telling you what you should run as far as pass rush stunts go, compared to when you have like Baron Browning and Randy Gregory, who might only be on the field for 5 games. So that's definitely a big difference. But I do think we'll probably end up seeing like kind of a combination of like a little bit of Vic Fangio. I think we will end up seeing like a little bit of the Wade Phillips stuff. It was interesting. Albright did mention that they're not running a lot of tight, but I do think that'll be something that kind of ends up getting switched up because I do think like they've got the personnel that I think we're just going to see so much dime this year. And like, I am interested to see if they do end up one gapping a lot, because I mean, when you talk about what the Wade defense does, I do think we're going to see a lot more of these linebackers mugging straight up on the line of scrimmage. Whether they end up sending them or not will be a kind of a whole different thing. But I do think we're going to just see so much 5 getting sent this year, you know? Sorry, what were you trying to say?
No, I was just, you touched on like both of you touched on 3 different points. If you guys remember, the zone match type stuff started to come into like the vernacular when Mahomes had issues with the Broncos under Vance Joseph, believe it or not. And so like in those things, that is something that like maybe that's some of the stuff that like he's bringing and marrying to Fangio, is because like it's not like he wasn't doing it. The mugging stuff, Josie Jewell did not look great in the original Vance Joseph defense. So like mugging him honestly might be a way to take advantage of his skill set and kind of keep him like kind of on, because Josie Jewell has grown a lot since those years. Like he's obviously not a rookie anymore, but also like his range is not what Alex Singleton or
Best going forward.
He's best going forward. And like, honestly, he might be a guy that if you're running dime or if you're running like a front where you're going to send a backer, he's kind of the guy that makes the most sense to.
Yeah. And then I'm curious if we end up seeing like Drew Sanders kind of play that like jack role, kind of be that like roaming, not roverish necessarily, but if we end up seeing Caden kind of be the guy playing deep, you see Justin and Kareem kind of maybe moving towards the line if they're playing some 3 safety sets with Drew Sanders moving around. I'm not worried too much about the pass defense this year. Against the Chiefs, I will be. But like the pass defense, Vance Joseph has always done pretty good defending the pass. The run defense scares the hell out of me because, as we've touched on, the interior defensive line depth isn't great. Well, his scheme really isn't, I don't think, the best at defending the run when you talk about how he likes to kind of set up. So that's, I'd say, the one area that really concerns me about the defense.
To your point, that's another reason why like a dime personnel makes a lot of sense. And again, like this is one of those things, when I look back, I was really surprised by this. In 2021, coming out of camp, and in 2020 coming out of camp. So this is in like September, like early September. the Saints only actually had 3 traditional defensive tackles on their initial roster.
Wow. Okay.
So like, again, like maybe Peyton is not as worried about like the defensive interior depth as we are, because like if they're going to run a lot of nickel and run a lot of like dime fronts and then move like your edge rushers up into like a traditional edge set and then move like Zach Allen in, like that kind of starts to solve some of this a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you're totally right. I
mean,
mean,
they've got some of the bodies to be able to do that. When you think about like Frank Clark and Randy Gregory, you know, they've got some of those bigger frames. I think that you can kind of make that happen.
Without question. And I think, Joe, you said it earlier, like even just having like Mike Purcell back kind of puts things a little more into place, at least a little bit. Like I think DJ Jones is more of a nose, but if I slide in on the depth chart, Mike Purcell is my nose and DJ Jones is my defensive end. It starts to at least look a little better.
Yeah.
Jonathan Harris is a backup on that list. But Joe, I want to go past the preseason a little bit, and I just kind of want to ask you broadly what your expectations for the season are. Like, do you expect this Broncos team to be a playoff team, for example?
I think they're going to be a fringe contender, and I hope I'm wrong. Like, the thing to keep in mind is Peyton took a worse team than this to the playoffs in 2005. Mm-hmm. At the same time, this is a different league than it was in 2005. Obviously, like Drew Brees, granted, I know he was coming off of injury back then, but like Drew Brees was a Pro Bowl quarterback the year that he like joined Sean Payton. Mm-hmm. Russell Wilson had a pretty down year. And granted, Russ, you know, theoretically, Payton's been pretty good at getting the most out of quarterbacks, but he also like, we're facing Mahomes in the division. The Chargers aren't going anywhere. I know like we do this every year, but like realistically, look at the Chargers. That's a good roster.
Always
we'll see if the team comes together, but the roster is threatening.
It's on. Yes.
In the AFC as a whole is the quarterback division or the quarterback conference. Like that's where all the talent is. Like if the Broncos are in the NFC, I would say they have a really good chance at the playoffs. Mm-hmm. The fact that they're in the AFC, I think we're going to be very, very happy with the improvements that they show. But I think injury luck, scheduling luck, and kind of like how you catch teams is going to ultimately dictate if they make the dance or not.
Right. No, yeah. No, I agree with man. I totally agree. I mean, I've been on record being like right now, and this could change a little bit. I don't know. Yeah. This isn't set in stone, but I'm looking at like an 8-win team right now. And if they won 8, I'd be pretty happy compared to what they did last year. I really would. I think that the Sean Payton experiment is not even an experiment. I feel as comfortable with Sean Payton as head coach. I think that first round pick that they traded for him completely validated. I thought that was a good decision, but I haven't felt as comfortable with the head coach since Gary Kubiak. And then before that, Mike Shanahan probably just off of resume and looking at what they've accomplished in the NFL to this point. So is it all going to come together this year? I'm doubtful. I'm doubtful that it's all going to come together this year. I think that the Broncos have some stiff top competition in the AFC West right now. And I don't know. I'm looking at a team that probably is middling of the pack, I'd say.
Yeah. No, I'd agree. I mean, I'd say the AFC, like you said, dude, the AFC as a whole is just a gauntlet right now. Like it's insane. It seems like they're 10 deep at having elite quarterbacks. It's so hard for you to be able to scrape into that division or into that that top tier without having one of those guys. And I mean, something like I've talked about with Jory, we've kind of touched on before, is like I don't think that this team has shifted enough towards being in Sean Payton's vision yet to kind of be there. I think when you talk about how the offensive line is constructed, you have some bodies that really match what Sean Payton likes. When you talk about a guy like Powers, Miners, McGlinchey, if he maybe kind of fits that. But like, you know, when you talk about the defense, how you were talking about how they've constructed their defensive line in New Orleans, which I know, you know, Sean Payton's not necessarily overseeing the same thing, but this is not a Sean Payton team yet. I will keep emphasizing it. This is the team he inherited from George Payton, Nathaniel Hackett, John Elway, etc. You know, that whole group. Like, I don't think that it's there yet. I think there's still a lot in this conference that makes it way too hard for them to crack into the top. So I also agree. I think they'll be right there, but I don't think they'll necessarily crack it.
Well, and to your point, like offensively, at least up front, you got to think about the fact, like schematically, they've like pretty drastically altered their personality or like how they're like viewing themselves as a running team from 2 years ago. Last year with Hackett, they moved away from all the gap stuff and tried to move into like a true like zone blocking system. And all of a sudden they're moving back to Payton. It's going to bring more power again. So like it's a big shift. Honestly, if Javonte Williams is actually healthy, I think he's going to have a really big year.
Yeah.
But it's also one of those things that I would be very shocked if Peyton doesn't go out and draft or pay a running back next year to add to that stable, to have two guys that can kind of be like in that. Because I think if they're going to be married to Russ for a minute, and I think unless he implodes again, I think they're going to try at least ride it out until they can't.
Right.
But I think having Russ is going to be, we need to have a run first team. And I think that's Peyton's plan. I think they're going to need to keep adding bodies to the stable as well.
So let me ask kind of a side question. Do you think, because when you're talking about like the type of run schemes that they're going to be running in Denver this year, one thing that's kind of been a big question for me is like Sean Payton, as you said, has run a lot of that counter stuff, has kind of run a lot more under center runs. There's a lot more variation, but that's not Russell Wilson. Wilson has always been an out of gun. Pretty much we're just running inside zones straight up the middle, and let's see if we can just bang out a little bit. Where do you think that marriage is going to go? Do you think we truly do see just Russ forced to play under center for a lot of snaps because he's in the Sean Payton offense, or do you think we just kind of see that kind of standard, we're going to be out of the gun like 90% of the time?
I think the true test to that is going to be, how does Russ actually look when he's passing?
Yeah.
Because if Russ is such a threat as a passer, ultimately passing the ball is more efficient than running the ball. And I know Peyton knows that, because like ultimately like Drew Brees was like, in his best years, like you still ran the ball some out of gun because the threat of Drew Brees opens up running lanes for the running game. But if Russell Wilson is the passer that we saw for the better part of last year, they're going to probably just try and mash the heck out of the ball because he's not threatening enough to help them anyway.
Yeah.
No, yeah. You guys bring us some really good points here.
Yeah, no, it's just so interesting because like you need Russ to be able to get these teams out of these too high looks by hopefully going under center and pounding the rock, but he's not good at that, so you can't really do that.
Well, and people got mad, but like when I commented about the whole Tim Patrick injury, saying like I kind of feel like it's gonna hurt Russ a lot because ultimately people forget because he was hurt last year. But like the thought was Tim Patrick's, he's the style of receiver that kind of perfectly fits what Russ did in Seattle.
Exactly.
He runs the sideline. He can win go balls. He can go up and get a ball, even if it's not perfect. And he can go underneath and play slants. Like he kind of gave you that second receiver that could do that. And losing that, I get that Mims is going to be like a dynamic threat, but we have yet to really see how he handles like being like a down the sideline and like in an NFL coverage. So like, I'm curious to see how that'll go. Because as you said, if teams can just sit in too high, they're going to.
It's done.
And then it's really tough. It's really
like
tough.
The discrepancy between his numbers last year got so bad. And then the other thing I want to touch on with Tim too is like he was probably one of the few guys that wasn't an identifier when he's on the field. Like when Greg Joseph is on the field, they're likely passing. When some of these other guys are on the field, what they're doing with guys like Eric Tomlinson that they had last year. Tim is really good in both facets of the offense. Guys like Cortland Sutton are as well. But when you talk about guys like Marvin Mims who are going to have to be taking his place, I can't imagine Marvin Mims motioning in tight and then trying to crack down block on a defensive end and it going terribly well. I just can't see it,
Right. Joe, I want to ask you one more question here before we get out. I want to ask you, you have all of these different training camp heroes. We've heard of them all before. We have Montrell Washington. We've heard of Alberto. We've heard of Justin Strnad. Just off the top of my head, right?
Yeah.
These are guys that just come off the top of my head.
Oh, the Justin Strnad year was such.
Yeah, Justin Strnad year was crazy.
We almost have the reunion year this year with Justin Strnad.
We almost did. And Frankie, until Joe comes back real quick, I will ask you, what do you make of this Brandon Johnson situation? Do you think he's actually the main guy?
I'd like to see him be. I mean, it sucks that he got the ankle sprain, even though it seems to be minor. As we were saying earlier, these are kind of those injuries that like they linger for guys. So for a guy like Brandon Johnson, who we're talking about being that inside-outside versatile guy, a guy who kind of relies on some quick breaks, we've been hearing about him kind of getting open really well in camp. That sucks that he's already kind of enduring some ankle injuries, and that'll probably be a lingering thing for him throughout the year. Hopefully he doesn't re-aggravate it too much. But I mean, I buy into it. He was a plenty talented player last year when we got the chance to see him. There aren't too many guys, I think, that kind of, as we're saying, when we're talking about a guy like Marvin Mims, that kind of have the frame where they're not just too much of a tell. Like, I'm very excited for what Marvin Mims can do, but I have a feeling he is going to be a pretty big tell that they're passing the ball when he's on the field. I don't think you have that issue so much with Brandon Johnson, especially coming out of UCF. He is a bit of a bigger body who I think can kind of fill that role a bit better.
Do you think it's actually going to be a tell though, Frankie? Because how many receivers are actually good at like blocking and everything like that?
I think it'll be a pretty, like, I don't know, man. Like, that was a big problem with
Like
Eric
when
Tomlinson
KJ
last
Hamler
year.
was out there, was it a towel?
Yeah. Totally.
You think it what?
Was KJ Hamler really out there on running? Like, I guess, like, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but if I had to guess, I would say that KJ Hamler was out there for a major majority of his snaps, probably near like the 70%, which is a high number, probably more in the 60s, probably more in those mid 60s. But like, I'd assume that he was probably around there for your passing game, because why wouldn't he be? You know, like, I think, especially for a guy like Sean Payton, like, he's so personnel based, he's going to be trying to get the best guys out there. You don't bring in guys like a fullback in Michael Burton, Chris Manhertz, and then you're coming out on first down having Marvin Mims, like I said, come down to crack block, you know?
I just, when I look at it, I'm like, okay, if it's that big of a tell, man, like, okay, so here's okay, I'm going to move on to this real quick, and then we'll start to get out of here. All the other news. This is the flow in the conversation type of stuff. What do you make of Greg Dulcich being the number 2 tight end on the depth chart, Frankie? Is that like an actual issue to you? Do you take notice of that, or what's your opinion there?
Henry Chisholm, who was on yesterday, had a great point yesterday. I mean, Dulcich isn't going to be your standard inline tight end. He's probably going to be playing a lot more of that joker, possibly like slightly off the line of scrimmage F role. He's just not your standard tight end. If you're looking for your run-of-the-mill tight end, Adam Troutman is probably your better go-to do-it-all type of guy right now, but I don't think it really says anything, about who they are as players. I think it probably says a little bit about where Dulcich is at as a blocker, maybe, but I don't think it's that big of a thing.
Okay, that's fair. All right, here's the question, Joe. I'll reintroduce you in the convo real quick. One, I want to ask you about Brandon Johnson and his and what you make of the training camp hype. We've all heard it before, man. With all the training camp hype, do you think this is actually like somebody that could come and contribute this year?
I mean, I think he's going to get an opportunity to. The fact, like the thing that matters with Brandon Johnson that has caught my attention is the fact he's actually also 3rd on the depth chart. Like the fact that he's like right there in the mix to me is a sign that it's not just the reporters, the coaching staff has noticed him. Now, what he does with that opportunity, we'll see, because this injury now is like kind of sapped some of the preseason stuff. So like we'll have to wait. But I agree in a general sense of like we were touching on earlier, when Montrell Washington's getting hype is like, this is the year he's turning the corner. And then you go and look and you're like, oh, he's still buried on the depth charts. Like that might just be like the cut and paste, like who's the 2nd-year player who was disappointing last year, because this year is the year he's going to be, because we see that every year.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the tweets, man, are just who's fast. I'll be completely honest out here. Like when I've gone to training camp and then I evaluate my thoughts on what happened to training camp compared to what's going on actually, like on Twitter and who's saying stuff, it's pretty much just we're ranking who's the fastest. That's what I've noticed. It really, really actually is that way. It's the who stands out. If there is a guy that's 6'6" out there, he had a great day. If that guy's running really fast, he was unbelievable.
Well, in part of this, though, it makes sense, though. Like, we've talked about this before with, like, the Senior Bowl. Like, really, really good route runners always look great at the Senior Bowl because they end up doing a lot of one-on-ones. So, like, they're going to show out. So, like, and those are areas where, like, you notice that they show out. So it's a similar idea.
It's funny touching on the speed thing, too, because, I mean, like, I always have to kind of find it every day where it's like, you'll read, like, I'll get through like 7 of the camp highlights and it's like, oh, wait, are they actually in pads today? Are they even playing full speed? Like, what's going on here? Because you'll be like, oh, man, this guy's having an excellent camp. And then I'll be like, oh, they're only playing at 70% speed. Like, you're not going to take away much. Oh, this running back's hitting the hole and he's so fast when they're walking it. You know, like they're doing installs. They're not even like running the offense.
Right. I mean, it's really
so hard to know what to take away.
No, those jukes look so great on air, guys. Like, I'll be completely honest. When I watch him, like, oh, he's a monster. And I really have to sit back.
The ghost of Christmas past went flying by and he couldn't even keep up.
Exactly. But Joe, man, I want to thank you so much for joining the show today. You were terrific. You really were.
Thank you.
Like I said, someone that I looked up to early on, someone that shared my content early on. I remember Joe
killed it. You guys both. It's awesome seeing where you guys are at because, like, I watched when you guys were like just starting out, and it's really cool to like see where you guys have landed because, like, you guys are killing it. So, like, I'm glad.
That, man.
Yeah. No,
it's been fun watching the whole Broncos community grow as a whole throughout all of our pain. You know, like we're all just in the struggle together.
The jokes are that much better when they're suck, unfortunately.
I want to believe that the Broncos will be good enough this year. I don't know if the record will be, but I want to say they're going to be good enough this year that we'll be happier than we will be sad.
Exactly.
That's my hope.
I need that. I think we all need that a little bit.
But
I don't want to be I don't want to hear about what pick we're going to be or our odds for a top 5 pick until like November. Those are always the most painful. Last year when it was like, oh, Broncos odds at a top 5 pick versus odds at like a playoff, they're going to get a top 5 pick, guys. And I was like, oh my God, it's really going downhill.
I was asking in the Let's Talk Broncos Discord already. I was like, we're setting an over-under on weeks until we see Caleb Williams in a Broncos jersey online. And, I'm getting a lot of week 2s, week 3s right now, unfortunately.
I will say if we're seeing week 2 and week 3 Caleb Williams, the wheels have completely come off on Russ. We're probably going to see some Jarrett Stidham.
Exactly. No, you're totally right. And, hey, Joe, thank you again for joining so much. You were an amazing guest. Fun. Can you please let the people know just where to follow your work?
Sure. I'm over on Twitter at Joro_NFL. I am kind of looking, if anyone's looking for a writer, let me know. I have some time now, so I'd be happy to do it.
Hell yeah,
perfect, Joe. Well, thank you so much for joining the show today. You were amazing. Like I said, hey, and thank you for joining the show and have a great rest of your day. I employ everybody to please go follow Joe. That's at Joe_NFL. Please go follow him. And thank you again, man.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys.
Great talking to you, dude.
Of course. Well, Frankie, Joe is a fantastic guest. I loved that. That was awesome. I don't think, Joe's not on many podcasts.
No.
That was actually really, really fun.
Yeah. No, it was nice getting I feel like we got into some more actual like football talk. We got to talk about gapping. We got to talk about run filming. We got to talk about like actual coverages and how it marriages to fronts. Oh my God, guys, football season is almost upon us. I'm so excited. I'm so excited to watch some Broncos film on Saturday or Sunday. I'm gonna be literally just like a mess. I'm gonna be just disgusting after watching like 12 plus hours of film. I'm not gonna eat. I'm not gonna shower. I'm not gonna drink water. I'm gonna look like a decrepit, like just like methamphetamine induced, like just slouch. And I'm just gonna embrace so much film in my eyes. It's gonna be beautiful, and I hope everybody's excited for it as I am.
Bro, I'm super excited for preseason as well. And Frankie, we'll quickly go through the end of the recent news here. Yeah. I want to talk about Mike McGlinchey. He's out 2 to 3 weeks with a knee sprain. What do you make of that? How concerning is that for you?
Sucks. Hopefully it's not something that lingers, but sadly knee things are usually something that kind of lingers and hampers you a little bit. Annoying we won't get to see him necessarily in the preseason, but at the same time, considering the weakness that is the tackle room right now outside of their top 3, which is Bowles, McGlinchey, and Cam Fleming, which is literally beyond that, it's a question mark. We've heard some encouraging things about guys like Isaiah Prince. I don't think it's the end of the world to miss him out in the preseason. I would like the opportunity to get to see some of these other tackles get a chance. Maybe they realize they don't have anybody and they need to go get a 4th guy. Maybe they end up trying some of these guards out at tackle. Who knows? I don't think it's the end of the world. It does suck, though, that it might be an injury that kind of lingers like some of these other ones have been.
Yeah, I know. That's the main thing. I just tackles hurt at this point suck. I hate seeing it from your offensive tackles. It just sucks. It just really, really sucks. There's other positions that I'd rather see that before offensive tackle.
Right.
I'll be quite frank right now.
And we've talked about how excited we are. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. For Quinn Miners to finally have an established right tackle next to him, and how important for him it was going to be to get to have
continuity. Yeah.
The continuity and actually not have to be making up for the guy next to him. Not that they've been pretty subpar sadly over the past few years, where I think most of us assume McGlinchey will at least be average. It sucks. It sucks that they don't get that opportunity to gel. But like I said, I am excited that they will at least get to see some of these other tackles, because I think that they really need to find a 4th guy.
Yeah, totally. I agree with you. One last thing here until we close out. I kind of want to actually, we have 2 more things. I'll hit on this one first. No Shelby Harris reunion, Frankie. He signed with the Cleveland Browns. I've always thought he's kind of been an underrated player through his entire NFL career. Do you think the Broncos missed out there signing Shelby Harris?
Yes and no. I mean, at the end of the day, I think it kind of more so not to be, super negative. I think it kind of shows their belief in the team right now. I think Shelby Harris, or a veteran like that at this point in free agency that you're looking to sign for $5 million is, you're doing that if you're a team that truly believes we are a playoff team, definitely, hoping to be more. I think the Broncos right now are saying we're maybe a playoff team, so we'd rather see if we can find maybe a hidden gem, someone who gets taken off of one of these other rosters, save the money and kind of apply it towards other places. Or I don't think it's a big miss out. I think if anything, it just kind of shows that they kind of know they don't need to go all in right now. I think a 1-year deal for Shelby Harris would have been exciting to see, but it's kind of short-sighted, especially when you talk about, like, I don't think that this is a Super Bowl team this year. So if you can find a UDFA or a late round pick guy, someone who can come in and play 200, 250 snaps, and we're a little bit excited about going into next season, I think that's more valuable for the team going forward.
Yeah, Shelby Harris to me feels like a Band-Aid for a Super Bowl winning or a Super Bowl contending team compared to a team that is looking for a long-term answer in the Broncos, where it's like we would rather find somebody or at least search for somebody than get a Band-Aid.
Exactly.
So I agree with you there. Last thing is Russell Wilson's been starting to really get going in training camp here. I'll be honest, I would cut out that first day because I was there and those 2 touchdown passes he threw, Frankie, we were in red zone drill. If the Broncos aren't scoring, it's more of an issue than anything. But I am going to believe everything that everyone's saying. Bree has been there. Zach has been there on a couple occasions since he got his new job. Henry of DNVR, who was on the podcast yesterday. I think really, guys, if you're going to go follow somebody from training camp, I go follow him. He's extremely unbiased through his work. And you can tell when you're reading his tweets and stuff like that. So please go show him some love. But what do you make of Russell Wilson starting to get going? How hopeful are you that carries over into the regular season?
So it's funny. I did want to touch on one thing with the red zone because I did see just some comments that made me laugh because the Broncos offense was very bad last year. But what's actually kind of funny is they weren't a terrible red zone offense. I think they were top 12 actually in red zone offense. They just never got into opposing teams' red zone. Between the 20s, they were by far the worst offense in the NFL. So I did think that was just a little funny that everybody's like, the red zone woes won't be whatever. Yeah, Russell Wilson turning a corner. As we mentioned last week when he was kind of having a bad week, we were hoping to see this happen. It seems like it's kind of happened. Seems a little bit, I don't want to say coincidental and act like it's only happening because Justin Simmons and Patrick Surtain and some of these other defenders have had to miss days, but it is happening a little bit happening at the same time. So it does feel nice. It's good to see for Russ. I'd like to see, I wish we heard.
I will say though, Frankie, with that red zone drill, like one of the touchdowns and no one wants to talk about it, but I'll talk about it because I don't care. I don't have media credentials. I'm not anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
One of those touchdowns was a boot, and it was just people getting lost, and the fullback got lost in the flat, and it was just like a dump. And it's just like those type of plays. I'm giving a lot more credit to the head coach or the play caller than I am the quarterback in those situations. I don't know.
If anything, that's concerning for the defense. That might just be a miscommunication that they need to get figured out.
Well, yeah, it's one of those plays we see every single time. I mean, how many times do we see a tight end or fullback get lost,
leak out into the flat, wide open, boom,
wide open in a red zone play?
Exactly.
It's a bread and butter red zone play. It makes it so easy for your offense. Yeah. So I don't know, but the rest of the days, it seems like literally yesterday he didn't throw it in completion. So hey, props to him. I want to see that continued in the regular season. I really, really do.
Yeah. I'm excited. It seems like the ball placement is cleaned up. I know when Zach was out there, he was kind of commenting that like it seemed like a lot of the deep shots were either a couple yards short, a couple yard over, whatever. We are seeing a lot more of those perfectly placed deep passes that our receivers are able to go up and win a little bit. I do wish we got to see or hear a little bit more about how Russ is looking, working the middle of the field, necessarily like working his way through his progressions. I know it's very hard for writers from a hill to be able to analyze that whatsoever, but I do wish we got to like hear or see a little bit more about that. It does seem like there is a bit of a trend in every highlight we see is Russ rolling right or left and throwing a 9-ball, a one-on-one with one of the corners, which again, great, but I think we all know that Russell Wilson can do that. I'm not worried about Russ's ability to beat a one-high safety and throw it to the sideline and hit a receiver. I want to see the other things get better, and I don't know if we've necessarily heard that yet, but I mean, again, we're not there, so I'm not going to act like I know anything. It's good to hear that it seems like he's turned it around so far.
Yeah, and hey, man, I think that closes us out for today. We're sitting here at 59 minutes on the dot right now, Frankie. I want to give another shout out to Joe Rowles. If you guys are looking for a really talented rider, please go hit him up at JoeRow_NFL. He does fantastic content. Please go make sure you are following him. You are hitting him up. Everything everything of that. But Frankie, where can they find your work, man?
Of course, yeah. Echo that. Follow Joe. Joe's sick, another film junkie like myself. Follow me at Frankie's Film. I'm on Twitter. I'll be posting crazy film. Also, Frankie's Film on Twitch. I'm probably going to start watching all 22 on Twitch that people can watch with me. I don't know if it's going to be super interactive. I'll try to answer questions. Yeah, I think it'll be fun. I've seen a lot of other people do it. I hope the NFL doesn't yell at me. I'm pretty sure they won't. And if they do, I'll be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And I'll stop doing it. But I don't think they will. So maybe stop by my Twitch and give me a follow over there if you want to check that out. Because I'm going to be doing that on Saturday or Sunday. And then where can they find your glorious stuff, Joey?
You and make sure you're liking the Let's Talk Broncos YouTube. Hey, listen to me right now. If you are listening to this podcast, if you're looking me in my eyes right now, I'm getting close up to the camera. Subscribe to the Let's Talk Broncos YouTube. Make sure you're subscribing. We have content like this all the time. Subscribe. Please subscribe. Follow me at JR Drafts as well. That's all I got. Till next time, guys. Go Broncos.